Indution-Kanmare mine, located on the northeast coast of Mozambique in Nampula. Mining industry has a lot of risks, one of them being energized equipment and machinery, most especially during repairs and maintenance. We are going to look at these risks and how to prevent them at Kanmare. Isolation and lockout. This video shows how maintenance and repairs work can be done safely at Kanmare. Isolation and lockout. The process of making equipment safe to work on. This process incorporates the following basic standards. A formal permit to work, except for routine tasks as approved by the department manager and plant engineer in writing. The use of defined discipline, personal and equipment locks, and an isolation bar or box. Clear identification of all isolation and lockout points. Isolation done on the main energy source. Suitable method of preventing movement for mechanical isolations. General hazards of not isolating equipment specific to Kanmare operations.
As you know, electricity is one of the most dangerous energies there is, due to the fact that you can't see it, can't smell it, but you certainly can feel it, and once you feel it, it can be lethal. The reason for isolation and lockout is to ensure that that energy source is fully and securely isolated and safe for use. By doing it, we work with up to 40,000 volts. And there is a saying that if you do isolation and you're 99.9% sure that it's isolated correctly, it is not. That 0.1% can kill a person. So it's vital that you are 100% sure that you have isolated correctly. And by isolating, it's physically testing, trying the equipment, and ensuring that it is completely locked out and safe before anybody goes and uses any of the equipment. Other part of isolation is to ensure the people working in the field are safe, and to take away from anybody getting mined, killed or burnt, as electricity is vitally and seriously dangerous hazard. So we have to ensure correct isolation at all times.
Na falha do isolamento de disjuntores de alta tensão na subestação pode resultar em fatalidades. O nosso nível de tensão dos disjuntores é de 22 kV. É só para ter uma noção o perigo que existe em isolar um disjuntor. Quais são as precauções? Em primeiro lugar, toda pessoa tem que estar certificada. A gente tem feito testes de 2 anos para certificar que as pessoas têm condições para isolar os disjuntores de alta tensão. Quais são os riscos que a gente tem que observar antes? Temos que verificar o estado dos disjuntores, isso é o nível do gás que corta o disjuntor, porque se o disjuntor não está com nível baixo de gás, ele não vai abrir em caso de isolamento. Quando é que a gente tem feito os isolamentos? Temos um procedimento de acordo com a demanda do trabalho que existe nas minas, quando temos os movimentos, é solicitado um isolamento, em que temos que ter 2 oficiais de isolamento certificados. Quando temos os 2 oficiais posicionados para o isolamento depois do seu pedido e todos os documentos de risk assessment feitos no local e todas as medidas de precauções, temos o procedimento que a gente efetua e bloqueia, abrimos o disjuntor e aterramos, que é para o corte total de energia.
KENMARE as an organization, to ensure the safety of its employees, it has come up with procedures. The procedure that I'm going to talk about is the isolation and lockout of different types of energy sources. Before any plant is inspected, maintained, cleaned or repaired, where practicable, it must be shut down and its energy sources must be locked out and tagged as the isolation procedure. Examples of sources of energy are electricity, hydraulic pressure, mechanical moving parts, compressed air or gas, gravity, kinetic spring tension and its moving parts. The aim of the procedure is to isolate all forms of potential hazardous energy sources to ensure that any accidental release of hazardous energy does not occur and all control measures are put in place. At WCPA, we've got pumps that push slurry from the plant all the way to the tailings, stakers, slimes, dams, and HMC to MSP. So these pumps have got electric motors as their prime movers. For us to ensure that the people who are doing maintenance on their mechanical parts, pumps, are protected, we ensure that the isolation procedure is followed.
Equipment materials used during isolating equipment. Key cabinet. The cabinet kept in a predefined and approved place controlled by the shift supervisor that houses all the unique keys for equipment locks that are used to carry out isolation procedures. Danger tag. A highly visible and recognizable attachable tag with the word danger, do not operate, placed on the redundant equipment, may not be operated until the tag is removed. Lockout station, bar and box. Personal locks, a brass lock with a single key used by the team members. Discipline locks, green representing electrical energy high tension, blue representing electrical energy low tension, black representing mechanical energy, orange representing process energy, yellow representing instrumentation energy, and used by isolation officers. Isolation and lockout steps. The applicant issues the general permit to work and submits it to the shift supervisor for approval. The responsible supervisor requests the relevant appointed isolation officer to indicate which equipment must be isolated before the task is started. Isolations may include more than one discipline. Example: electrical high tension or low tension, mechanical, process and instrumentation, or a combination of any of these. An isolation bar will be selected and the unique ringed key for that bar will be taken from the key cabinet and used to unlock the number of the key alike equipment locks required by all disciplines involved in a working on the task. Where an isolation box is used, the key alike equipment locks will be taken from the inside the box. The isolation officer will first apply the equipment locks. These will also be the last locks to be removed. If the task requires an electrical isolation, the isolation officer will be a qualified electrician, and she will isolate the electrical power to the equipment in the MCC. The isolation officer will switch off the circuit breaker on the equipment panel and lock the handle in the off position using one of the key-alike equipment locks from the selected bar on the lockout station or from the inside of the dedicated lockout box. On completion of the switching, the isolation officer will request the control room operator to attempt to start the isolated equipment and thus prove isolation. If the equipment cannot be started from the control room, the isolation officer will fill out a clearance certificate and attach the top copy to the electrical discipline blue lock. The equipment lock ringed key will then be placed on the upper section of the chosen lockout bar or into the lockout box and then the electrical discipline blue lock. The equipment lock ringed key will be placed on the upper section of the chosen lockout bar or into the lockout box, and then the electrical discipline blue lock, accompanied with the clearance certificate, will be locked onto the top of the bar or box to prevent access to the ringed equipment lock key. The second copy of the clearance certificate remains in the book. The isolation officer to confirm isolation in a general permit to work. The applicant and all the work team members will then install their personal locks on the bar or box to prevent removal of the ringed key. If there are more team members than the holes available on the bar or box, then a caliper shall be used, allowing extra locks to be fixed onto other personal locks. Each personal lock must have distinctive identification, such as a tag attached to it, indicating the team member's photo, name, and identification number, and only have one key. The key of any personal lock may not be given to someone else to remove the lock. Discipline locks have multiple keys which are only carried by appointed discipline isolation officers. If the isolation officer is part of the working crew that will be working on that particular task, then he must also put his personal lock on the bar or box. Discipline locks will remain in place when handing over the subsequent shifts. Persons competent to isolate and lock out, discipline-specific isolation officers, will hold keys which will only fit their discipline-specific locks. Once the applicant arrives at the workplace, in the field, she must request the control room to try and start the equipment to check that the correct piece of equipment has been isolated.
Peço para me verificar o equipamento SC1101. Ok, já está. Obrigado.
If the control room confirms that the equipment cannot be started, the applicant will deactivate the emergency stop button in the field and work may commence. On completion of the work, the applicant will sign off the general permit to work, and the entire work team will remove all their personal locks from the bar or box. If an employee or contractor has left the site without removing his/her personal lock, and it is not practical to recall the employee contractor to remove it, the lock may be removed with the permission of only the plant superintendent or plant engineer after confirmation of the whereabouts of the owner of the lock in question. The shift supervisor will inspect the work area, making sure that all guards are in place and that the equipment is safe to operate. He will then unlatch the emergency stop and request the isolation officer to de-isolate. If all personal locks have been removed, the isolation officer will remove the relevant discipline lock and remove the key from the bar or box to de-isolate. The equipment ringed key must be hung up on the dedicated hook in the key cabinet. The same procedure must be followed where isolation locks from an isolation bar or box must be used to lock out the valves, preventing them from being opened. This could be done by chaining and locking the manual valves in the closed position or closing and isolating the air supply to an auto valve. Kanmare. We care, we grow, we excel. Be a brother's keeper, and let's keep Kanmare safe for everyone.